Hello everyone, Lucian here and welcome to another Thanks Encyclopedia weekly report. May is over. We've gotten through the first month of handling donations and payments to the illustrators. We have received $94, of which we spent $89 on 9 different illustrations. 7 of these illustrations have not yet been published and will appear in the next month. We would again like to thank all our patrons. This has been an immense help for us. Not all has been perfect though. PayPal has changed its transfer fees from a percentage to a flat rate. While we initially paid around 15 cents to transfer the money, this has now risen to more than $2. We are looking into ways of going around this, and our illustrators have been quite understanding and helpful. Now, the awesome news. We have finally gone back to publishing 3 articles per week, which was our initial intention when we started the Patreon campaign. It is not yet clear if we will be able to sustain this rhythm, but at least for the next month, we should be covered. We hope you'll enjoy the new articles, and again, thank you to all our patrons. Talking about articles, we have started the week with the republishing of our T110 article, with a new illustration. Harold, the author, will tell us more about this series of vehicles.
In 1954, even while the T-43, the predecessor to the M103, was still in development, the U.S. Army was looking toward the future. 2 distinct lineages of tanks stemming from the T-43 design were developed. One would become the T-57 and T-58 oscillating turret designs, while the other would become the T-110. In June 1954, the third question mark conference was held, the goal of which was brainstorming ideas for new heavy tanks. Multiple designs were put forward, but 4 were seriously considered. These 4 designs were differing combinations of the 105mm T-210 and the 120mm T-123E1 cannon in either casemate superstructures or rotating turrets. Conditions for the designs were that the prototype had to be built within 2 years' time, hence the name Tracked Vehicle Short Development, or TS, and it had to be able to fit within the confines of the Bern International Clearance Diagram, a code of standardizations for rail tunnels in Europe established at the International Conference at Bern, Switzerland in 1913. Chrysler's TS-31 design was chosen as the winner. It was armed with the 120mm T-123E1 in a casemate, propelled by an 810 horsepower Continental AVI 1790-8 engine, weighed 45 tons, and had armor up to 9 inches thick. It was indexed as 120mm gun tank T-110. However, the design was too large to fit within most European rail tunnels, so it had to be modified. For months, Chrysler went back and forth with Detroit Arsenal, with each organization proposing their own modified versions of the tank, all of which remained too large in some aspect to fit the tunnel requirement. The superstructure moved from the center of the tank to the rear, then back to the center, then back to the rear, and then to the front. The driver's position was moved in and out of the casemate several times, and the commander, no matter where his position was moved to, always seemed to have been forced to squat on top of the hot engine. At some point, Chrysler realized they were supposed to be making a tank, and there was no reason they needed to stick with the casemate design, and so the T-110 was radically changed, becoming a much more conventional turreted design, not unlike the T-43 it was meant to replace. In fact, the T-110 was very similar to the T-43, with even the turret ring diameters being the same. However, the T-110 was a much more compact design, even though this, the 6th and final version, was still too large to fit the tunnel requirement. But by this time, the 3rd version of the T-43, the E2, had been built and showed that the T-43 design was just as viable as the T-110, and so the T-110 was scrapped and the T-43 was standardized as the M103.
Thank you, Harold. This article has been illustrated by Yaroslav Yanas. The next article of our week looked at the British Excalibur light tank destroyer. During the 60s, Britain looked at developing a light air portable armored vehicle capable of taking out tanks. In this vein, the School of Tank Technology came up with the Excalibur design, a 30-ton, 105mm gun-armed, aluminum tank destroyer capable of being transported in the Royal Air Force's ugliest ever transport plane, the Blackburn B-101 Beverley. The design never got past the drawing board, but the concept was used in future projects. This article was written by Virgil Mendax and illustrated by Bernard Escodrian Baker. The illustration has been paid for with funds from our Patreon campaign. The last article of the week concerned the Yugoslav SO-122 tank. During the 50s and 60s, the Yugoslav People's Army had developed several tank prototype projects. The main goal of these projects was to develop the first domestic tank by using existing models as its base. Some projects were focused on modernization and adaptation of older and outdated tanks and other equipment in order to extend their operational use. One such project was the SO-122, developed between 1956 and 1966. The M4 Sherman tank was used as a basis, powered with a modified T-34-85 engine and armed with the 122mm A-19 Soviet field gun. Essentially, this was a combination of many, mostly World War II era equipment. The idea was that by installing a large caliber gun on the M4 tank chassis, its operational service life would be extended. At the same time, this would increase its firepower and allow it to deal with more modern tanks and to be used as a heavy fire support vehicle. Despite a planned production of some 100 vehicles, only one vehicle was ever built. This article was written by Marco Pantelic and illustrated by David Bokele. From this report onwards, we'll be featuring some small weekly segments on various topics. The first one will cover tank-related gaming news. Lawrence, you have the floor.
Let's take a quick look at some of the week's gaming-related news. In World of Tanks, the public test of patch 1.0.2 is now live. It features changes to several maps, nerfing of Object 268v4, and the introduction of two new Soviet tanks, the K91 and Object 277. In the Soup test, we see four new tanks, the Excelsior, Chimera, Object 726, and the Chol TWZ51. Apologize if my Polish is wrong. Now on to War Thunder. And probably the biggest news is War Thunder is coming to Xbox One. This is being released alongside patch 1.79, which contains new premium and standard vehicles and a new combined arms map, Italy. Lastly, Armored Warfare. Black Sea Incursion is now released, seeing the release of the much-awaited Corner EM and an awesome new special operation.
Thank you, Lawrence. Well, that was all for this week. Until next time, don't forget to visit our website, like us on Facebook, or donate on our Patreon page. Look out and keep us in your sights.